My task today is to talk about money, and I learned to do a lot of this kind of talk at First AME Church, Los Angeles, under Pastor Cecil Murray's leadership. He hired me in 1993 to help run a transportation project that had been granted money from the county after the Rodney King uprisings. And I was supposed to work for 90 days to help establish that program. And 12 years later, he retired and I exited Fame Church. I worked with that team through that season from 93. For me, it was from 93 till 2005. So 12 years. I learned a lot, so I'm gonna share with you some of that. If you ask me a question, I'll just tell you. And then I was recruited by Faithful Central Bible Church a year after I left Fame. Faithful Central Bible Church was the church that was fortunate to acquire the Forum in the early 2000s, and we were running an arena and a church. And I was CFO for both church and arena. And I was fortunate enough to be part of when we sold it. And we sold it to Madison Square Gardens, who in turn sold it to the Ballmer organization now that owns the Forum. We're proud that we helped usher in the great entertainment industry that is now taken over Inglewood or South LA. So I can tell you some stories about that. I can tell you church leaders about what to do and not to do in some cases, or how to analyze it well. But today I just want to focus on matters of money. It's a big deal right through here. The economy looks like it's going to be shaking for a few more months or years. Shaking, by that I mean trembling, a lot of uncertainty. And that's what it will be, uncertainty for a period of time. Because if your decision making is waffly, you can expect the outcomes to be. And it's going to be all right in the long run, but in the short term, don't panic. Don't be a panicking. That's what the president said. People. No, the Bible says, be careful for nothing. Don't trip. Just because all around you are storms, in many cases, that's the time to calm down and wait for somebody to cry out, peace, be still. So for those of you online, chip in questions. I'll do my best. I am officially retired in 2 months. I retire from all of what I'm about to talk to you.
Got you at the right time.
I've been doing this for 32 years. And on my 67th birthday this summer, I made a commitment. I'm done. And done is good because you can go do something else. And so I just plotted it into my journey. And I've advised most people to plot your journey. You only allotted so much time anyway. And if you don't plot it, if you stay like some pastors in these slots until the day they die, you have wasted legacy and you have crippled your successors. I don't want to fuss at pastors, but pastors who don't plan to be done leave behind that which cannot be sustained. You don't prepare your people. You don't prepare the next generation. You think you're supposed to be Mr. It or Miss It for the rest of all times. And what you can see just by reading Old Testament, that approach does not work. You can just read the Kings and the Chronicles and see how them players who got up all lofty, how they their journeys ended, most of them ended negatively because they were not conscientious about tomorrow. So church leaders today suffer from something that they're not even aware of. And I read this book in the 90s. A guy named Robert Wuthnow wrote a book called Crisis in the Churches. This is 30 years ago almost. Crisis in the Churches. And his principal thesis was that most churches in America are fundamentally bankrupt, not spiritually bankrupt. They're just fundamentally bankrupt because most churches in America have buildings they can't afford. Their operations are mostly the preacher and the musician. And if you talk about doing ministry, those are after effects. They're not conscientious initiatives of the church because they have no resources to do anything substantial. And if you look at their finances, they have less coming in and more going out. The pastors can hardly earn a salary if they get one at all. And so the pastor spends more energy trying to make sure he can feed his family than in leading the church. So what now? Describe that as a crisis. And that crisis is undergirded by the lack of resources or the lack of initiative and intellectual ability to manage resources well so that the organizations that churches were then could be sustained. And we know this to be true because more bars in America open and close than churches. Churches, actually last year, there were 4,000 churches shut down last year. That's kind of the constant since the pandemic. And most churches, if you really look at them carefully, don't have enough people in them to sustain the building and the operations that they have before them. And so there should be more mergers in churches than there should be opening up new institutions. Now, I'm not telling people not to hear from the Lord, but I am suggesting that there's data that supports being smarter about this stuff. And money is a key factor in it. And these 5 M's of the Murray method might help you. I learned these years ago from Reverend Murray directly. We would chatter about these kinds of things, and he became so good at this stuff that back when he retired, USC came recruiting him to have the Tansy chair of I forget whatever that long title was. And oh, by the way, I got to sit with the president of the university back then and Reverend Murray and help him negotiate his deal with USC. Yeah, I was there. It was kind of cool to see our boss be elevated that way. And he had to retire because the AME Church required retirement at a certain age. And I tried to dispute with the bishop then about that. I thought it was dumb. And I told the bishop then, and I'm sorry. And he tried to argue that the AME Church had that threshold because they're trying to recruit younger members. And he told me about the average age of the pastors in the church, which at that time was almost 70. And it still is. And I tried to argue that you have a stellar leader who's built the biggest, most effective church west of the Mississippi in that tradition, and it's just unwise to take them off the board cavalierly. That was my argument. I didn't win the argument, but what happened was predictable because the structure of organizations and the inability of leaders to understand structure of organizations and to be clear about mission as opposed to clear about culture, clear about tradition, clear about trying to posture to get resources that they have not earned. They're good at that stuff. They weren't clear about how to make sure that that thing perpetuated and grew. And so they didn't want to deal with what is on this card right here, mission. Reverend Murray had these 5 M's. He talked about them regularly. He taught me. He said, it's about what we do is about mission, membership, money, maintenance, and morale. Mission was for me very clear. I can tell you to this day the mission of First AME Church, and I left there 20 years ago. It was simple. make the word become flesh. Some people thought it was first to serve, but that was the motto. The mission was make the word become flesh through economic development, spiritually, culturally, et cetera, but it was about making the word flesh. That was the mission of the church. And that was so distinct and clear that mission gets in your heart, gets in your spirit, gets in the lives of the people. And if you can say it clearly, you can do it clearly. And if you keep it before your people, eventually they embrace. The mission ought to be a clearly defined thing. I'll even argue this. The Bible already defined it. We just like to replace it. The Bible already said it. We just like to replace it. And mission is important because your money will be funny till your mission is clarified.
Hold up, man. I'm trying to take that. Hold on, Steve. Say it again.
Come on, coach.
Mission is important because your money will be funny until it's clarified. Here's a business school concept. Ambiguous organizations, you might not have ever heard this, are characterized by unclear goals, uncertain technologies, and multiple constituencies. Imagine what a church looks like. They're kind of like universities have these characteristics too, because they have so many constituencies. But the characterization of an ambiguous organization, and I'm going to mention about this in a minute, ambiguous organizations, unclear goals, uncertain technologies, multiple constituencies. The scholars on business talk about this because if your organization is ambiguous, you're like the crisis in the churches. You're about to go bankrupt. Because if you don't have a clearly stated mission, you're going to do different things in different directions, and your people are going to go different directions. You'll have a siloistic, you guys heard that word before? Organization. And so you'll have these folk over here trying to function to fulfill their call, and these folk over here trying to fulfill their call, and there's no clarifying of what the duty is. So everybody just going their own way, hanging out culturally. And that's kind of what most churches, black churches in particular, look like. The usher board running its own church. The choir director and the musicians running their own church. Y'all know what I'm talking about? The preacher got an assistant pastor who wants to be the preacher. So if you put him up to pray, he preaches during the prayer. Y'all know what I'm talking about? So your worship service has this agony going on and ain't nobody fixing it. That's because unclear goal. You ain't told the people what you really want them to do. You ain't set no standard, no parameters, and you ain't stated it in a way that can resonate with the heart. Right. So no wonder your church is always at odds. And then you sure got the mother sitting over there who recruited you, who wants you to preach what she say preach, or want you to address what somebody else is wearing. Just makes it hard.
You're telling the truth.
You have to identify mission. Now the Bible helps us to take out that ambiguity, because that's what all that is. Anytime it's unclear in any household, in any church, you're going to have chaos. Because you ain't even telling people which direction to go. Or they're going in all directions, which means you're not getting anywhere. So ambiguity is one of them things that a lot of us don't realize, that we're being ambiguous. I hate ambiguity because you can't do much effectively if you ain't certain about what you're about to do. I restore old cars and trucks. I can't do that with imprecision. If I want my engine to run, it's got a way to run, and there's certain mixtures and things you have to do to make that thing run and stay running. Or if you want suspension to have a quality ride, you got to do some stuff that you we can't Frankenstein in a quality ride.
Exactly.
You understand what I'm saying? Mission is so important that I can't really talk about money without saying mission is a starting point. because that's what Reverend Murray taught me. And I've observed it in reality. You got to get mission. Then you got to get membership so you can get people on board. Y'all know what I'm saying? Because if you got no people, you got no money. Unless you inherit, or unless you, if you play the lottery, win. You're going to need some folk. And those folk need to have some connection. And I think it needs to be more than just historical or traditional connection. And they need to have some connection with what you're trying to do. If they're not vested in it, how are you going to ask them to support it? If they don't buy what you're selling, why do you think they're going to give you money to keep selling what you're selling? If they're not, I mean, you know, if people get sold out for Jesus and haven't chose to participate with your approach to it or to him, then why would you think they're going to finance it? It's a simple equation. Once people get vested in the church and that church starts doing stuff and they like what it's doing and they help to build stuff and they get to sing and they meet their friends and they meet their spouse and they don't meet their spouse, they just meet somebody and they make a baby. I'm just telling you how it works. And then they make babies and then they start hanging out and you got the young adults and and then they get older and then the grandbabies come. And if the church is smart, it's investing its energy to get more babies made. I'm just saying, this is how church is sustained. And if you don't get people, you got no money. If you have no mission, you cannot get people. And if you don't get people, you have no money. You just won't get the resource. So that's kind of how this methodology that's shared here works. And you got to be conscientious about it. You can't be ignorant about it. Example, Jesus gave us the mission of the church in 5 frames. He said, go make disciples. I think that's in Matthew 28, right? And then he said, baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, right? Then he said, teach them to observe all that I've commanded, disciple, right? That's kind of like mission. What is the church or what are his disciples supposed to do? Go make more disciples. Go get some more followers. First action, go make some and teach them, get them to buy in. Y'all see what I'm saying? And they follow. And then they're going to go make some, teach them, buy in. Y'all, ain't that what the Bible said? And then he gave 2 other directives in Matthew 22, I think it was. Then he said, I got you. I'm giving you 2 commandments on which everything else hangs. Yeah. That's what he said. He said, love God. All your heart, mind, soul, right? Everything. Just everything. Right? Then he said, and love your neighbor as yourself. So love God, love others. 5 clearly stated directives to all those who follow Jesus Christ. Clearly stated. Now you can enhance some of them and blah, blah, blah. But for us, we summarize it and make the word flesh. That's what Jesus said. Jesus was the word. Those are the things he said. Do that. Make it happen among the people. That's how we said it, right? Now we're getting people. Because people are believing and buying this stuff. I'm sorry. I'm reminded of this notion of a religious economy. Y'all know what an economy is, right? And a lot of religious people ignore that they're building out, operating within a religious economy. And in America, American religion is more about the economics than it is anything else. If you believe in capitalism, you believe in Jesus. Because they've converged the two. I'm sorry. And when I grew up in the Pentecostal black church. I never heard about Jesus without somebody connecting it to some money. Have you all heard about Jesus without the the offering time was just as holy as the preaching time. And then the system, Lord, okay, I taught at West Angeles Bible College for 8 years. I was ordained minister in the Church of God in Christ by Bishop Charles E. Blake. And that system of denominationalism was about an economic engine. Y'all may not believe me, but that economic engine paid for me to go through seminary. They gave me $1,000 a month for 3 years to underwrite my cost of schooling when I went to get my master's degree. That was my church. Yeah. Yes. And I taught 8 years after I graduated. Thank you. To say thank you to my church, my guy. He helped pay my bills. Now that's economy, right? And in exchange, they just wanted me to do a good work. Yeah. And I got their permission. I literally went to Bishop Blake and said, is it all right if I go work for Cecil Murray? And he said, you go ahead, son. So I had a foot over here and a foot over here. And that's why Reverend Murray called me stereo. That's true. Because of the religious economy of a church, of an institution. And even the way black pastors do that trading of money with their anniversaries. I got you, Doc. You walk over there, pluck yours down. Yeah. Mine's is on this day. Doc comes over here, plucks his down. Now what's slick? Let me tell y'all what's slick. It ain't their money. It's their church's money. Some of them is most often the church's money paying the other pastor so he get a little bonus. I'm just telling you, I used to participate. I used to facilitate. I know what I'm talking about. And then the flip side, and they trade in money. Yes, man. Swapping dollars. When I was 19, I fussed at my father about this. I was 19 years old. He was superintendent of the district. And every time the pastors do a district meeting once a year, is whose night is it and how much money and who's going to get the offering that day. And then there's the official day, which would have been my dad. And them dudes were trading $100, $200. They're trying to get $1,000. I said, dude, I was 19. I was arrogant, smart aleck, mannish. That's what my mama called me. Mannish back then. And I told him, this makes no sense. Y'all just trading money. We burning energy for y'all to trade money, and it ain't enough money. I said, you need to quit this. I actually convinced my dad to quit being a superintendent because the money it just didn't make sense. I argue with pastors all the time. You chasing this little money and you leaving all this other resource on the table because you're not looking down the road. You're not thinking ahead. And your energy, your time is spent after little pots of money. Little pots. Because if the best anniversary for even the mega church pastor might be $100,000, that ain't no money. You go pocket it, go buy a car, a depreciating asset. Right. Yeah. Right. What? Y'all, you feel me? Yeah. But if you plot out differently and have most pastors just have a proper salary, a proper allocation to a retirement fund, and proper self-management, you'll probably come out ahead anyhow without them little bitty bonuses every now and then. But some people don't believe that money works for you. You don't work for it. And I'll tell you this, I told some youngsters this a couple weeks ago. Money ain't even real. Right. Money, by definition, in our society, is an imagined reality. That's what they call it. All this trading, That's why when we worried about some stuff, we worried about stuff that ain't even for real.
Come on,
There's a lot of stuff it's a tool ain't what you use to get a tool is what you use to get the result you seek. Money is a tool. Money ain't the result you seek. If you are seeking money as a result, you are failing and you're suffering, in the church certainly, from another book. Wasn't I wrote it too? Not Christ. He said, God and mammon in the churches. Yeah. That's what he called it. God and mammon. The love of money is the root of all evil, not money, because money is the tool. Right. The love thing is the issue. People chasing. You see? So pastors, leaders of nonprofits, there's smarter ways to do this stuff. One, have a mission that you can articulate in a few words. I would even argue if you can put it in 2 words, is memorable. And the first word ought to be a verb, and the second word ought to be a noun or a noun phrase. I would argue that for your own personal ministry or purpose. If you can get it down to 1 word and a verb and another word and a noun phrase, you won't forget it. All that chatter and spiritual talk people do, they don't be doing nothing but talking, chatter. Because they don't know what the purpose is. They don't know what the mission is. So if I can make it become flesh, that's quick. That's a verb and a noun phrase. My personal mission for until June 30, 2025. My personal mission statement is this until June 30, 2025, 2 months away. Equip those who serve. That's all I said I was going to do. That's my personal ministry. In two words, I can say it, or a word and a noun phrase. Everything you do ought to start with a verb, because if you don't start the word with a verb, you ain't going to do nothing. A verb, by definition, is an action. And if you don't plot to have an action, you won't get the action done. I don't care how many folk praying for a breakthrough.
Come on. Come on.
Inaction is just inaction. You'll be waiting on the Lord. That'll be your action. Wait. Wait, I say, wait. That's inaction. But if you say, Lord, help me to go, and I'm taking step number 1, you might get where you're trying to go. Now, these things don't sound like economics, do they? But they are. I have not met an entrepreneur who wasn't action-oriented. Person says, I got a dream and I'm going to start a business or an enterprise or I'm going after it, are action-oriented. And without the action, you're waiting to win the lottery. And you ought not be gambling on no lottery anyway if you got good sense, because you're not likely to win and you're funding somebody else's foolishness. Yeah, but I ain't telling Christians what to do. I ain't trying to say it's a sin or nothing, but it is kind of dumb. Y'all know what I mean. All right, so you got mission, you got membership. In membership, you got to get constituents that want to be there. Not people held hostage or captive. You don't want cult-like experiences. Y'all see what I'm saying? They got to get vested in what you're doing, not who you are. Celebrity culture is dumb, because if you sold out to the who, they're going to disappoint you. And that includes pastors. I don't know any of them who are famous who haven't let a lot of people down because they turn out to be famous, but not necessarily very good at what they're famous for. Mm-hmm. Influencers, talkers. Some people are just good at talking. They ain't good at getting stuff done or fulfilling the promises they've made. And then they get exposed. Then you got a whole cult, you got a whole economic engine on YouTube where people got followers up the yang talking about other people. That's the enterprise. It's all foolishness, or what Ecclesiastes calls vanity. It's all meaninglessness, right? So my point to you is, if people get vested, if they're for the Lord, they're for the Lord. They're not for you. They're not for you. Reverend Murray he would say this. I'm gonna share some of his Murrayisms. Stereo, never take others too seriously. That's what he'd say. He'd start with that one. Never take others too seriously. And he would say it with that deep voice, and he'd be looking at you, and it was like speaking into your heart, right? Never take others too seriously. Now, I might be complaining in the moment or trying to describe the problem somebody created. He said, never take others too seriously. He says, and never take yourself too seriously. And Reverend Murray didn't take himself as seriously as most people. And then he said, and if that don't work, I can't say it on camera. He'd say, forget about it.
Say it like he said.
What did you say?
Forget about it.
He'd say, forget about it. Yeah. Yeah. He'd use that F word. Yeah. Because it wasn't about him, it's about us. That's how he rolled. That mission thing was primary for him, and he took care of the people because that's what the mission required. And people's morale, that's one of our things. It's all about, if people are on board with the mission, there's an uplift that's almost natural. It's almost natural, but it really is spiritual. He describes it here as the morale of the people, congregation, or organization is rooted in their spiritual grounding or relationship with God. That's how it's described here. That's a beautiful summary of how he rolled. So now back to money. So now you know mission, membership, money can happen. Money can happen, and money must happen if you're going to get done what you set out to do. And you need to have at least 3 things to get the kind of resources you need. Can I be
Transparent.
yeah, let me be transparent. Now, this is Steve Johnson having practiced this. You need credibility. You need credibility. Now, in our society, that's checked on every individual who wants to borrow something or convince somebody to invest in something. Credibility. And some people don't think this is important. But most of y'all, if you want to buy a car, they're going to run a credit check. A credibility check. Right? And there's a score that they got globally for everybody in this country called a credit rating, a credibility rating. That's what it is. You need credibility. Credibility is not just granted, it's earned. So if you borrow one time, you got to pay it back one time, and they give you a little rise on your credibility. But if you borrow one time and halfway pay it back and come in with all them excuses we love to have and blaming it on, then you've lessened your credibility, right? Okay, if you get appointed to be the pastor of the church and you walk into the count room and put your hand in the offering plate and take out something and put in your pocket, you've just lowered your credibility. Because somebody gonna tell it.
That's right. That's right.
But if you keep your hands off the money in the count room and make sure others are handling it in an appropriate way, it elevates your credibility. Y'all see what I'm saying? And as your credibility elevates, guess what people with money want to do? Share it with you, because they can count on you to do with your resources what you said you would do. If pastors are walking around with the checkbook in their pocket or if their wife got the church's checkbook, then you ain't got no credibility.
Oh, that's it.
I'm talking about half the black churches in the country right now. If the pastor can go into the bank account without the knowledge of the church treasurer or the church board or the church accountant and transact without an approval process built in, he ain't got no credibility. So then when he starts his nonprofit and he starts saying, I want to bless the community, he ain't got a financial statement to walk in with.
Right.
To earn any credibility. So you got to do fundamental things right. Earn credibility. There's a right way to do some of this stuff, and some of it ain't rocket science. And accountants call it separation of duty. If you raise the money in the offering plate, you ain't supposed to be touching the money.
Come on, coach.
At all. You ought to be scared to be near the money.
Right.
Because you don't want nobody saying you were trying to steal the money. I'm just telling you, this is how you raise credibility. I done worked for the top 3 megachurch pastors in this city over the last 30 years in one form or another. Not one of them ever put their hand near the money. They hire people like me to handle the money, and even I didn't put my hand near the money. I had a treasurer of these organizations. The treasurer has a function to control the money. There's a treasury function and there's an accounting function. They ain't the same thing. And as a CFO, my job was to make sure all of that system operated in such a way as to raise credibility. I'm just telling you, that word gets, if you can sustain credibility, you can walk into any place and propose any kind of enterprise as long as it makes sense, and you'll likely win. I'll give you an example, an old one and a new one. Back in the day, Mark Whitlock said, Rev. Murray, we want to build the Renaissance Center. Can the church give us some money? Sure, son, let's talk about it with the board, blah, blah, blah. They talked about it with the board, and the board said no. I favored the idea. The board said no, we couldn't do it. Mark wanted, I'll tell you how much it was. He wanted $300,000 to buy the building, because it was toe-up building, and $180,000 for pre-development costs. Church said, we are not going to give you almost $500,000 to just get started. But if you can raise the money, we're all in. That's what they said. So Mark and I, okay, let's go find money. So Mark went to hustling and I went to calculating. Mark Whitlock used to work at this place, was what I called the rainmaker. You go make it rain and we'll structure this thing to make it work.
Yeah.
So Mark goes and he talks to everybody. Eventually the city of LA granted us $480,000 to buy that building and to do pre-development work to determine the costs, with the promise on our part that we would provide services instead of paying the money back. See what we did? They gave us $480,000 and we gave them the promise that when we finished, we were going to provide economic development kind of services. And they signed on to that. Why? Credibility. Fame had credibility. With the city, with the community, with the people. Our pastor wasn't messing with the money. See what I'm saying? Credibility. Okay, let's fast forward to a more recent incident. I told you all I helped sell the farm, right? Mm-hmm. I took, when I came to Faithful Central, church was $30 million in debt. $30 million. We had a $10-12 million note on the church properties and another $17 million note on the farm. I had set a goal, just a big goal. I'm working for him now. I'm in. I'm part of it. I didn't blame him or nothing. I said, I'm in it. And don't tell Bishop Omer I did this. Don't y'all tell. But I'm going to tell you, it kind of happened this way. The church was using the building on Sundays only for worship services. Mm-hmm. And it was costing the church about $80,000 a month to use its own building on Sundays and then rent it out during the other days because you had to stage the building every time. So I asked Bishop Omer, could I present something to him over lunch? And we went to some restaurant and I did a one-page spreadsheet on what would happen to the church's cash flow if we weren't using that building for 90 days. And my proposal was, let's go back to the other place for 90 days so we can build up a little cash cushion. That was my proposal. He says, he was concerned about what the people might say. And I said, that's a good concern, but it's only 90 days. So I just need 90 days to get this money right. That's basically what I proposed. He said, okay, let's try it. Them 90 days, that money rose. We had a little more cash in the bank, right? Mm-hmm. I says, can you give me 90 days more? By then, the people had kind of accepted. We're back. So we got 90 days more. When the question came up after that next 90 days, he posted to the congregation, y'all want to go back? And they said, no. I won right there. Because I knew if we didn't go back, we had a pathway to selling it. See my point? And when we sold it, we knocked off $17 million of debt. We made about $8 million on the transaction. So we got some cash, we knocked out some debt, and we changed the trajectory of the church. We're now a church operation, not a church arena operation. And the arena was the tail wagging the dog, so to speak, because the finances were so sunk into the arena that a lot of what the church wanted to do, it couldn't. It had not the resources. See my point? Credibility. And it wasn't conflict or argument. It was mostly just let the story tell itself. See my point? The other thing you're going to need, along with credibility, this is economics. This is money stuff. All right. You're going to need to make the right commitments. You're going to need to make the right commitments. You're going to have to make better decisions, Pastor. You got to make better decisions. If you indebt your church, that debt don't go away just because you pray.
Come on.
It does not. It goes away when you pay it off.
Come on.
Or when you default and they take your building. How many pastors do you know that's happened to? And you shouldn't borrow money to pay operating expenses anyway. Because if you're borrowing just to pay yourself, you got a date with destiny. And it's not going to be pleasant. You got to make better decisions. Sometimes you got to cut your losses. Just a clear analysis of where your enterprise truly is. Sometimes you got to cut your losses and sell it. Y'all ever had to do that? Ever made a personal financial mistake and had to fix it? You got to double check your commitments. And your commitment to your institution or your organization ought to supersede your commitment to yourself.
Come on.
Sorry. The criteria is almost the same. Put my, Megan, can you put my slide on the board? And then I'm going to stop and take questions. On my wall in my office, I'm a coach now, you know. So all I coach are from these M's. On mission, on membership. And I write it on the wall because when people come in my office and they start talking about something, I already got something to pull out. On any of them categories. On money, I'm going to suggest something to people that's going to challenge everybody. Everybody in here ought to be pursuing on living on at most 70% of your income. And if you're smart, you get it down to 50%. Everybody ought not be spending every nickel on your needs and your wants. I'm just telling you the truth. How do churches operate? Should be the same principle. If your church is spending more than 70% of its income on the operations, paying the bills, paying the pastor, blah, 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 you ain't got no money to do nothing. You can't save appropriately. You can't even give appropriately. Oh, did y'all know the church ought to be a giver? We'd say individuals ought to be. So why isn't the church living within some framework that makes sense to us personally? If personally, pastors, if you're operating living above 70%, I can almost assure you so is your church. Because it becomes habitual. It's not something you can't fix, but you have to set targets. The quickest way to personal financial renovation is to set percentage targets. So most people say make a budget. I'm not that guy. I done budgets for 30 some years. I already know that if I set right targets and I commit and stay on course, hit my target, my budget's gonna come in clean. 70% ought to be the number. Yes, sir.
Just give a quick picture of what that looks like.
Sure. Let's say your church has $100,000 in annual income, right? And you got to pay the musicians, pay the pastor, pay the mortgage, pay the taxes, pay and some taxes, the payroll taxes primarily, pay the insurance. Then you got to fix the organ when it breaks down, and somebody got to be the janitor, keep the place clean. Then you got to keep the grounds looking beautiful, because part of maintenance is to make sure you're taking care of your stuff. Pride of ownership. So that tally is somewhere around 70%, and you need to never go over that, so that you can take 20% and invest and save. What should you save? You should save enough money to cover about 6 months of your church operating costs, and you should be putting some money, about 10% of the 20, into some investment that's earning money. A CD, some kind of portfolio, because you should be, your money, this is America. Money makes money. Am I wrong?
Right.
But most of us spend not realizing the value of earn and make. So you set percentage goals, 100 grand, 70 goes to operating. And a little fun, because churches love to feed people, see. So even all that fun and food, and when you send them to the beach, whatever,
That's in the 70.
that's in the 70. All that activity is in the 70. Then you got 20 for strategic investment, savings, and then the other 10, you tithe. You give it away. You support other worthy causes. Your church might say, we're interested in helping homeless initiatives. You tithe as an act of mission. You do what Melchizedek did, or what Abraham did with Melchizedek.
Okay.
Remember? You give 10%. And that should just be a goal, a target. What happens when you're living on 50 though? Ooh, when you're living on 50, you could give away more,
Right.
save more, invest more. Ain't that smart? So, money, start with some targets and commit to them. Start with some targets and commit to them. You might say, I'm gonna start with 50 and work my way to it. One of my favorite quotes is Benjamin Mays. He says, not failure is sin, Low aim is sin. Not failure, but low aim is sin.
What is the word you're saying?
Not failure, but low aim is sin. Targets. And you got to commit to the target, and if you're smart, you aim high because you're bound to hit the target. Low aim is sin. Harmatia, you preachers. That's what that word literally means. Because it's based on the man with the arrow missing the mark.
Yeah.
See? So when it comes to church money, this is a formula that I've used, and I'm gonna give you a couple books to read. I've given this to the senior pastor who's been there 2 years now at Faithful Central. I give it to everybody. There's a book by, what's his name? Housel, called Psychology of Money. Pastors, every pastor in the country need to read that book so they get that love of money spirit out of them, and then they got to fake like they don't. There's a psychology behind it, and that's a helpful tool to reinterpret how we understand money. Credibility, commitment. And I'm gonna give you this last one, the last C, and I'm gonna hush. Don't y'all take me wrongly. But you also need some cunning. Intentional cunning. Because this stuff is not unsophisticated. And there's ways to pull off some stuff. If you got the cunning, you could do it with legitimacy and credibility. You just need to learn what the stuff is. And it's written in books. There's somebody on YouTube telling you about it right now.
Yeah.
But if you don't use your God-given wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove initiatives. And I'm talking pastors now. Pastors kind of resist the learning dynamic that they have to be constantly involved in. Therefore, you only draw from your biblical cunning.
Yeah.
You can turn that word around and be all slick and then be revealing stuff and have the people all. What about that other? How come that cunning does not apply to real world experience?
That's good.
So you can piece through and help people piece through some of this stuff. Like I told you, set percentages. I didn't say make a budget because I'm smart enough to know you ain't gonna do it. And you ain't gonna follow it. You ain't gonna stick with it. But if I can convince your inner self to reset, then you can set a target and aim at it. And even if you come close, you're gonna be better off than when you weren't aiming. That's cunning, you see? Some people say that's slick. But y'all get my point. But you have to be intentional about it or you won't do it. You won't do the study, the reading. I subscribed to Harvard Business Review years ago so I can learn how those people were thinking. I was reading not church stuff more than I was reading church stuff.
Right.
Because I needed to understand the world. To such a degree, I could help navigate the organization to wherever its goals were. And navigate, I helped. I'm about to retire, y'all. Did I tell y'all that? One of the beauties of this journey, though, when I came to Faithful Central, we had $30 million in debt. Last June, we retired all of its debt.
Yeah. Wow.
I can tell you today, Faithful Central has zero mortgage to pay to anybody. To anybody. Our board of elders has an investment committee that's taking and stacking money into investment portfolios. And we'll be buying soon in this downturn, so we're gonna make more money.
Right.
For the church and for the mission. See my point? our operating costs have 9 months of operating in savings. So if the worst thing happens, the church can sustain. See my point? 9. I know the number. You see what I'm saying? Now we're handing that off to another generation. My job then was to be cunning enough to train them. I made a commitment to that. That's my thing. Till June 30. Well, here's the thing. Come June 30, I've become a consultant to the same organization on just 2 projects. One, I'll tell y'all, we're making a movie, a film that's coming out in December. We're funding it out of our 10% money, which is really 18%, but we're funding it out of our mission budget. And the second thing that I'm because I've kind of noticed stuff. We got a producer. I started an LLC to hold the company. It's got a DBA, and we're going to make a movie, and the church is not going to take any risk at all. Actually, it's more complicated. This is cunning. There's the church. There's the nonprofit affiliate we call Champions for Progress. Then there's the movie LLC. Then there's the movie DBA. Why? Because if somebody gonna sue the movie, it ain't gonna get to the church. Because it limits liability. See my point? How do I know to do that? I read it somewhere. See my point? If I read it, somebody else could read it. Anybody can do this stuff. That's what I mean by cunning. That's my point to you. The second big thing I'm going to be consulting on is church is doing a major expansion, renovation of its major sanctuary. It's getting a facelift. And we're going to add another 1,000 seats to it. We're going to do it without borrowing a dime. We're going to do it out of what we call cash flow. And we have the means to do so. And such, we plotted it. I plotted it out for them for the next 3 years. I'll be retired. I'll be consulting on it. But that's all I'm going to be doing. And if they don't call me, I ain't going to answer.
And so that's not going to touch the 9 months of reserve?
Not at all. Not one nickel.
We were putting that money aside just to pay for the development?
Sort of, yeah.
Come on, that's such a cunning answer.
I know, isn't it? Have you ever heard of depreciation?
Yes.
Y'all know how to read financial statements? Learn to read financial statements and make sure if your church ain't expensing depreciation every time, you ain't got no money. Because depreciation is non-cash, but it lowers what you think is your net income. Then you have that much more cash to do. We only use it for capital improvements. So as CapEx is allocated through a budget process every year, we set a determined amount that we're going to spend in that year on capital improvement. CapEx is capital expenditure, capital improvement, not capital campaign. We don't raise no money to do this. We just take the money we already raised to do this. See my point? And consequently, as it amasses, we do the improvements get done. Everybody's hallelujah, praising the Lord. They get invested, you see. They like this stuff. And so they give you more money.
Exactly. That's right.
But that's your depreciation for the year.
Yeah, annual depreciation, yes. But they support. We did a mural on the side of one of our buildings last year. That built so much morale. We had people going out there help putting them little pieces of tile and gluing them down. And we had hundreds of people out there. They love their church. Now the pastor got to be the pastor. I got to be the guy that making sure people love their church. Because I know what happens when people love their church. They support it. And so revenue goals are hit or exceeded every year because people love the church. We're 10% above budget this year so far, even in an economic downturn. Why? Because people attach to if the church is about it, they will attach and they'll be about it too. And if they have resources, they'll provide some. And some will provide a little, like the widow and the mite, which is probably the more significant gift you could get. And every now and then, the big Pharisee roll up in there and give you a big chunk too. And you have to recruit new. So one of the beautiful things about a church is that most of them are going to be multi-generational if they're effective. And so having someone walking with you together, like our treasurer at Faithful is 86 years old. He'd been the treasurer since 1986. That's my guy. When I came there 20 years ago, I was young buck to him. I used to tell them, I'm gonna tell you this, don't do what I do. Because this was not untrue. My favorite people were deacons. I grew up under the deacons. The deacons showed me what real men were like. The deacons showed me how to,
Keep coming.
them was my people. Some of them were the musicians. They know how to paint. They know how to fix on stuff. So when I got there, my first stop was with the guys. And I told them how the deacons are my favorite people. I'm kid you not. That's how I got connected to. That's how I became their favorite guy. Now that wasn't untrue. Because I promise you, I wouldn't have gone to church if it weren't for the deacons having fun. And my daddy was the pastor. See what I'm saying? So I'm saying generations can bond over some things, and you got to facilitate the bonding. You got to recruit new to it, and they got to experience old simultaneously, and you got to nurture it because the expertise will come with the new generation. You can't make an older generation expert, but you can give them the promise. Now we're going to take it to another level because we don't want your legacy to be diminished. So the person I praised and made sure the church praised when we paid off the mortgage was not me. It was the treasurer of the church who'd been here since 1986. That guy got the standing ovation because he watched all of this journey. So I couldn't take, I set a goal and he was okay with it. And he would ask me every year, are we getting closer to paying this thing off, son? I said, Elder, we almost there. We almost there. He said, good. That's my guy. So you see what I'm suggesting to you? You got to bring in that's why if your church is doing the membership thing, then you grab from them. I would advise, don't hire consultants. They're mostly a waste of money if you don't intend to do nothing with it. They will tell you everything right to do, and you will have wasted your money if you ain't committed to do it. That's why the commitment part is important. I've seen churches bring in consultants, and consultants will tell you all the right stuff. Take your money, leave, and you still there not able to do nothing because you ain't committed to do it anyway. So I would suggest you make a commitment. You choose where you're going to focus and you stick with it till you get that thing fixed. Then you move to the next system problem that you might want to fix. See what I'm saying? So that way you can get it done. So one way to be accountable is report out. Everybody say it, report out.
Report out.
That's transparency built in. Now you have to figure out how your report out will happen. But if you don't report out what's going on, you will not have credibility. So you got to report it out. And there's minimum things you should be reporting out. A summary of your balance sheet or statement of financial position for nonprofits, a summary of your activities or operations or statement of activities, and a cash flow statement should be reported out in summary form once a year at whatever annual business meeting you do. Don't line item it, or you're going to have fussing going on. But if you report it out, It tells what it is. How I typically report it out is in basic language. This is what we own. This is what we owe. This is what we have when we paid off what we owe. Assets, liabilities, fund balance. You guys see what I'm saying? Hold on, let me finish this second part of the question. Now, report out. You should also report out monthly in a financial statement. That way you have them. Those reports should go to the pastor and the board. And that should be not line item detail, but by category.
On a Sunday morning?
Every month, not on Sunday mornings.
Just once a month?
Once a month.
Don't show me that on Sunday.
Do it at your monthly meetings, or make sure your accountant is giving you, pastor, and the treasurer and the chairman of your board a financial report once a month.
Well, I thought the membership needed to hear.
The membership does not need to hear none of that other than that annual report out. That's what the members should get to hear. An annual report out. Call it whatever, the annual church meeting, call it whatever, but include a financial report in it. The reason why that's important is because you're including them. That's transparency. If the membership is line item gagging you, you will just be having church fights because everybody ain't going to agree with what you're paying for. And some of it's by law too. You should be telling people salary no way. Some things are confidential. And every member don't need to know confidential information. Just like you don't know what the CEO's getting paid at these big companies until somebody tell on them. And you sure don't know what the staff's getting paid. You might know ranges, but you don't know. Because they don't tell us that in the financial statement. The digital age, your ability to let people give easily will raise your revenue. Because we're in a culture, a society where ease is just what people expect. If they can, you can go on Amazon and order it, and you gotta use the systems that people get used to using. Young people don't write checks. They don't know how.
No carry cash.
And they don't carry cash. Did y'all know that? They literally don't know how. I taught a 25-year-old young woman. She says, I never wrote a check before. She didn't know. They don't teach that anymore. So you do need a system to make it easier for your people to participate, but you don't throw away your old system, because remember, you got generations. So you got older people who still want to drop their money in the offering plate.
Right.
But you got younger people who are going to give on the Cash App or something, right? Both opportunities. And then sometimes because of that, you don't even have to waste time during the service passing the plate. Just let them drop it. See what I'm saying? You can make things more efficient, which heightens the experience of your worship setting if you can make things efficient for people and take all them time killers out. Now, Reverend Murray was good at taking time killer out of a church service, because thou shalt not. This was his 11th commandment. Y'all never heard this. Some of you heard it, but Reverend Murray's 11th commandment was thou shalt not bore people. You remember that one? That was conscientious. I got two comments on that. One, I favor bi-vocational because it keeps the pastor aware of the world and how it works. Full-time pastors, if they don't really have a full-time gig, they just, by that I mean, if they only preaching on Sunday and prepping a sermon all week long, they got too much time on their hands. Just tell you the truth. They need to work. They need a job. And not just for the money, but I don't know how you could be entrepreneurial as a leader if all you do is want to be full time. Them early stages require to answer the online person's question, you got to prep the same way I've just described. You got to build credibility. You got to make certain kind of commitments. You got to set some targets, and you got to work to those targets using your good senses, because it's not an automatic. So if I were working and then I know at some point I need to transition, I've hired people to run the money. I've hired people to take care of the maintenance. I've hired people to do the business. Now my job is to be over as CEO of all them people. Plus I got to preach. Plus I got to bury the dead. I got to perform the weddings. I got to do visitation. Now I can farm out those tasks as well as we grow. But I got to then be recruiting people to these tasks. I got to find out if they have the certain giftedness for these tasks. And then that's going to take a period of time that I got to plot out as a goal. So if my goal is just, I want to be full time, that's dumb. Do you see my point? Because there's prerequisites to the goal that's going to take some planning, some plotting, some targeting, some thought, and then you will reach it. And then your money needs to be able to match it. And so your money has to have some goals set for it. So if I were going to go full time, I need to be able to afford it within my 70%, pastor's salary included. See my premise? I don't need to go full time and have to beg the people every year for an anniversary gift so I can pay my bills and take a vacation. Does that make sense to anybody? If I can afford the pastor's salary at a fair rate in comparison to what other people of similar sized churches are earning, I'm likely to be able to sustain it. And then it can grow because I'm mission oriented, not money oriented. So full-time status is a desired goal. I don't disagree with it. I like bivocational because it has an other element that, by the way, black churches used to always be bivocational. The pastor also owned the funeral home or the barbershop. Y'all don't remember them days, do you? Just saying. They were also business people who had other involvements and investments. And then we evolved as a people. I'm not knocking it. We evolved as a people because, Martin Luther King Jr. and Black Power and all that. And we start rising up a little bit. That's a good thing. But you don't forget what brought you here. You use both and, not either or. Does that make sense? So bivocational is using both and, not an either or divide. Depends on the circumstance. Yes.
And I just want to add, because you do make a point in talking about Pastor Murray, but I also want to your point, draw out, Pastor Murray was a full-time pastor, but Fame ran full-time. So the
24/7 full-time.
24/7, right? So Fame was not a church that closed on Monday. It actually opened early on Monday at 7, and that was Monday through Sunday. So that's the difference. Even though he didn't go to a place called a job, there were job hours, like staff was there at 7 till 5.
Right.
That was Monday through Sunday.
That's correct.
So that's the distinction.
I'll even give you this little added.
And he might have been there at 6.
I worked for First AME Church for 12 years. And for 20 years, I also served as lead pastor of Carter Memorial Church of God in Christ in San Bernardino. I had a full-time gig and a part-time church, same time. The only thing I did not do was visitation. I farmed that out. And I was younger then. That's why I'm smarter now than I was then. And by the way, I was in my 30s, so we thought we could do anything. Yeah. And Reverend Murray had you convinced you could. Y'all know what I'm saying? So that's what I did. I did that for 20 years. I gave that up in 2013 was when I stopped being a pastor of a church. I was 55. I feel like now like I did then. I'm so done. But not negatively. It's freeing when you've done your part. I celebrate it. So anyway, so I kind of know about bivocational from a church business perspective, but I was working for a church at the same time. Yes, sir. It's hard to be a pastor today because of so much in terms of the way people are. They're everywhere now. They're easy to access, but they have low attention spans. And you have to reach them on all these various platforms, including live and in person. So there are challenges, absolutely. And then you have to generate the resources to afford all that and sustain it. So I agree that a pastor has to be in many ways entrepreneurial because of all of those different approaches to reach people. But I think that's the advantage. In fact, I think that's more like what you're supposed to do in the first place, which goes back to the mission that Jesus, God, gave us in the first place, which was go and make disciples. That's what he said. He said, go and hustle the people. I mean, hustle up some people. The values in the building, and often your heavier costs are in the building. So you can wipe out costs and sell off the asset and take the resources and allocate them elsewhere. And that could be into development or nonprofits or programs or mergers. As long as it don't go into somebody's pocket, it's good. It's probably a good thing. But I agree with the notion because we have a lot of empty buildings, empty of people. Buildings. You got on that card 5 M's. Where Murray gave me a 6th. Now this ain't for that card. Do not add this to that card. But there's a 6th M he would often talk about. That's me. He meant it in terms of you got to work on yourself. You got to work on your stuff. You got to work on your interests. You got to, and I share this with different individuals based on where they are. I use mine. This is literally my me, my M. And these are from learnings, observations, from studies, from developing my own ethos, from taking the lessons of my mentor, etc. But I want to, self-management, y'all, that's an obvious thing you've got to be able to do, right? Get your own stuff in order. But there's something for pastors I want them to consider. You got to be aware of your egocentric bias. This is for all people. Everybody comes at this stuff and they're often unaware that they have a natural self-preservation thing going on. And it's a bias that helps you miss some of what's really happening in the world. You cannot discern effectively if you filter through your ego. You cannot hear God. I would argue this with Pentecostals, Baptists, I don't care. You can't really hear God if it's all about you.
That was the first sin. That was Lucifer, pride and ego.
Exactly. But if you're unaware of it, you don't do nothing with it. You don't do nothing about it. So you miss a lot of those insights, a lot of those revelations because you're unable to see. It's a self-blinding thing. So you got to work on it. There's a lot of literature about this in the psychology professions. Now, some things are just obvious. I fast often. I write it down. Because denying myself is smart. Do y'all know that's smart, right? Yeah. It's healthy. Yeah. I write it down. Pray without ceasing. I do that because my grandmama told me to.
Pray without ceasing.
Don't stop praying. So I don't need long-winded prayers. I'm always praying. I don't even like long-winded prayers. Because I'm like, you ain't praying, you're just showing off. Praying is private. I'm biblically speaking. And it goes to a closet story. Preachers, don't y'all know this stuff? Yeah. But we celebrate it in these public ways, and we know it ain't nothing but our egocentric bias at work. Right. We just following the culture and the tradition. I'm good at dispelling it because I grew up in it, so I'm cynical about it, but I love it. Does that make sense? Yes. But just because they sold it don't mean I got to buy it and perpetuate foolishness. You see what I'm saying? I'm about done. If you guys don't have any more questions, I just say pray all the time, and then gamble not, calculate fast. If you need something, and I need a miracle, Lord, that's when you should be praying and calculating, not trying to go get a bounty somewhere or selling somebody some wolf tickets. If you do this, God's going to bless you. That's just nonsense. It's not proven. Y'all know this. You can't, this is not substantiated. Can't be substantiated because that's not how it happens. So it's just something I typically do. Then last thing I'm going to tell you about is my ethos. I don't normally tell people my personal ethos. I got it from James Costin when I was in seminary. The ethos of the school I went to, ITC, was honesty, integrity, industry, and commitment. That resonated with me when I was in my 30s, still resonates with me. It's at the core of how I do things. Then I had to modernize it because I was in my 30s, so I came up with a way to reframe what James Costin, God rest his soul, passed on to me then. I do religion from the dark. I knew then that there was going to be some things that I would have to see differently. And I defined the dark as devotion, action, recreation, recreation, and knowledge. That's been my ethos for 30 some years. My personal ethos, my way of doing it. And I operate in the dark. Devotion, action, recreation, and knowledge. And if anybody asks me, how did I get to where I am? It's because I stuck with that for the journey. Thus ends my sharing. God bless y'all.